Rob, thanks for coming in and talking to some of our clients about your experiences. I know it was a very difficult time in your life for you, and one of the standout stories in my career in terms of the way in which the prosecution was used against you. Yeah. In many ways, you're kind of the reason we provide these essential services now, because I helped you and realised that a lot of colleagues of yours were also at risk of similar things happening to them in the future. Yeah. And that's kind of the genesis of, or at least when we decided to launch the essential services package. Yeah. But you came to corrections already having a career. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I was 17, 2 months old when I joined the Army back in 1987.
Wow.
And did 25 years service, did 3 operational tours, Namibia, East Timor, and then finally Afghanistan.
Yes.
As an explosive ordnance disposal technician. Army wanted to post me out of southeast Queensland. I asked them not to. I was still more than happy to serve. But my kids had just started, or were at the age when they were going to start school. Yes. And I promised my wife that I would never pull them from school to school because of my career. So from there, I then applied for corrections.
I hear this a lot with corrections and police, and experienced it myself when I was in the police, that people come to those roles sometimes having had a career in the military, because they're used to dealing with stress, and they're used to dealing with danger, making sound operational decisions under sometimes fire or certainly in great stressful situations. So they're ideally suited to those sort of roles, and those corrections and police tend to encourage people to come from the military.
Certainly.
But sometimes I've certainly heard or seen, and yours is one of those cases where you probably feel like you were sort of used until you were no longer needed, and then chewed up and spat out to some extent.
100%. When I arrived at corrections, I was 42 at that stage, yeah. And almost 43. So obviously I was more mature than a lot of the other people that I did my course with. When I got to Woodford Correctional Centre, where I worked after my course, they soon realised that I was not so strict, but firm, but fair, mm-hmm. And wouldn't take a backward step when dealing with prisoners. And and that was always, I would explain where the line is, and that they weren't allowed to cross the line. And if they stayed on their side of the line, they would get every single thing that they were entitled to, nothing more. Mm-hmm. But, the biggest problem with prisoners is they get upset when they don't have their administrative needs met, money on the phone and all that sort of stuff. They're big things to prisoners. Yeah. And it was always my aim to treat them the same as I treat any other person, fulfil their needs as required, provided it was allowed. Mm-hmm. But I also would enforce the rules should the need arise. Yeah. And as a result of that, I was identified to work predominantly in response roles. So a response role would be someone who, if there was a code yellow, for instance, and that was a prisoner, unruly prisoner, or the staff needs assistance, mm-hmm. we would run to that unit and provide the necessary support and the backup for the staff in there, and then, if required, remove the prisoner from the unit, take them to the detention unit. Yes. I started getting roles 6 months into my time at Woodford in the detention unit, and predominantly I was either a response officer or I was in the detention unit. Yeah. And the detention unit's the prison, basically within the prison.
It's where all the hard, difficult, dangerous prisons go.
Yes, that's right. I mean, they've got an MSU, which is like once a prisoner is, for instance, assaulted staff or killed another prisoner or something like that, they'll be probably placed in the maximum security unit. But all of the unruly prisoners that, don't go as far as physical assault on a staff member, they would go to the detention unit.
Right.
And makes it no less dangerous, and we get the prisoners who would bronze up, for lack of a better term, where they smear themselves in their own excrement, the walls and everything else, to make it difficult for us to go in and deal with them and create hazards, create threats to us. And, as a result of being in the detention unit, I was required to use force, every week, every other day sometimes. And that was just part and parcel of the job. And, I was never told that or disciplined for any use of force that I'd had in basically 5 years of working in the detention unit and as a response officer.
Yeah, you were fair, you were compliant.
For sure.
You were reliable.
Yes.
And as you say, you'd never had an allegation before.
No.
And these are dangerous places, aren't they? People don't understand, but I mean, I watch a lot of the footage of people working in these centres, and I'm frankly astounded by the things that you and your former colleagues do in terms of, there might be a unit with whatever number of prisoners and only 2 officers moving around without any protection other than the fact that they're there, and that if they get into trouble, they're being watched. Someone's hopefully going to respond quickly if they get into strife. But that takes a lot of bravery and also the ability to de-escalate things and to deal with conflict.
Yes,
and you taught use of force, you, and guidelines, and in fact, we'll talk now about your unfortunate brush with the criminal justice system. But back then you had a use of force manual, didn't you?
Yes.
And you were taught it at the academy, and you trained in it and refreshed it from time to time.
100%. We, in regards to my incident, got a point on the side of the jaw called the clavicle notch, and they at the academy teach people to come up behind a prisoner, grab them by the head, tilt the head across, and imply the tip of the thumb into the clavicle notch. Now, if I had have done that to a prisoner, I would have been in more trouble than I ended up in when we first met.
Yes.
Because that in itself is physical assault. In a scuffle or so forth, then that's a different story. But the way they actually taught us was sitting like you and I are now, and getting somebody to come up behind and just tilt the head. And
It's nice, it's sanitary, isn't it?
it is. And the problem is that during our trial, my trial, the prosecution called in expert witnesses and asked, is this the way that they were employed or taught to employ that manoeuvre? And, there was no latitude from that in that situation, where in reality, a use of force, you try to use the force that you're trained to use in the best way that you can in that situation. And in my situation, I had a prisoner in front of me, and trying to support his neck so I didn't hurt his neck, and apply pressure to get
Pain compliance.
Yeah, pain compliance, and that was it. Unfortunately for me, it looked bad on the camera. There was no audio, but there were 2 police officers present in the room at the time.
That's right.
Who both give the statements. The one who could actually see what was going on, there was a female police officer who was behind, so she's obviously written a statement off the footage.
Yes.
Whereas the actual other police officer who assisted me in that use of force, give the true testament that what I was doing was Correct.
Thumbs.
Plying the thumbs, and you couldn't see that on the camera.
No.
You know, they implied that I grabbed him by the throat and was choking him, which was not the case.
Of course, why would you?
Yeah, you know, like that. That's not the way that you treat another human being, regardless of who they are and what they are. But and look, I was bitterly disappointed because. You know, I went above and beyond for the correctional system, you know, in that whenever they had absences, you know, they'd call me short notice because I lived close to the prison and I would do overtimes. And to the point where my wife would say, you know, you spend more time at that prison than you do at home. And, you know, but I had that sense of service to the community and so forth because the prisoners can't go unwatched because, you know, and they have basic needs. You know, they need to be fed, they need to come out of their cells and communicate with other people and everything else. And if there's no staff there to do it, then
Can't do it. They just get locked down.
They get locked down, which makes them more upset, more violent, and it becomes an even more dangerous place to work. So,
and people don't, they quickly forget that, particularly if you haven't been in these places, it's not like being on the Queen Street Mall, is it?
No.
So, you know, so if a prisoner gets out of control and starts a fight, you know, fights back against a correctional officer, that can quickly spread, can't it, to other prisoners?
100%.
Then before you know, you're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was a lack of that consideration by the people who try to judge these things through a camera.
Yes.
You must have felt that when there's charges.
Throughout the trial, I can't remember the actual time frame. There might have been a minute or two of the footage from inside the room. Prior to the footage starting that we had for our trial, the prisoner was making threats at staff through the window. So, you know, the prisoner's already amped up because he was receiving more time. You know, he was getting another summons to appear or order to appear.
That's why the police were there.
Yeah, that's why the police were there. So he was obviously upset about that. We were watching through the window. When I say we, me and another officer who was standing behind me, were watching through the window.
Watching the police talking to him.
Watching the police talking to him because obviously they're visitors from outside of the centre. In a room, you know, alone with the prisoner. And the prisoner was unrestrained, so he had no handcuffs or anything like that on. And yes, they were police officers, well trained and probably more than capable to deal with that prisoner. However, it was my responsibility.
That's right.
Not their responsibility.
They don't have function in the police, in the correctional centre, do they?
No, they're actually, you know, apart from to protect themselves, I'm allowed to touch the prisoners.
Yeah.
And that's the reason we were standing at the door, was because that was our requirement to do so.
Yes.
So you never got to see the prisoner threatening us on that footage. You only get to see the actual little bit of the incident itself, and then you don't see any more past that.
And that was a problem, wasn't it? Because they didn't give you everything.
That's right. That's exactly right. And they stated that we only copied this because it only keeps for 30 days or 31 days or something like that. So they took that little piece. However, during the trial, they had the footage of the hallway where it showed nothing, and there was almost an hour of footage.
That's right.
So how come they can have an hour of footage there, but they only have this little bit of footage here? It was because it made me look bad.
That's right.
And didn't back up every single thing I said, like the prisoner was threatening. And normally, in a normal situation, we're required to warn a prisoner before we use force. However, in this case, you know, the police issued the paperwork, the prisoner got up, slammed the desk, The door flew open, and it was the police officer opening the door, and then the prisoner come straight at me and barged into me in an attempt to knock me off my feet. And in which case I was more than justified, without warning, to use force.
That's right. That's right.
Even though the footage looked bad, I was never questioned about that. I wrote my report, and within my report, I also put in what was then a mandatory statement about the use of force and how I applied tactics, techniques and procedures that I'd been taught to use on prisoners. And, that no other force other than necessary force was used to make the prisoner compliant. Yeah, the next day I was marched out of the prison. I was called to the general manager's office and told that I was not allowed to contact any member of corrections.
The team,
anybody I work with. And, I had good friends in there, and they're saying you can't communicate with your good friends and anybody. And then they left me high and dry for 4.5 months.
Yes.
And then when I finally got approached by the police that they were investigating, and that's when I was informed that, they never had enough evidence. And I said to her, the female police sergeant investigator, that I said, well, if you never had enough evidence then to charge me, why have you now got enough evidence to charge me? And she said, we have the same evidence that we had originally.
Yes.
And I said, so how come you're charging me if you said you couldn't charge me or you didn't have the evidence to charge me? And she said, because purely and simply corrections want you charged.
Yeah, I've been told to do it.
Yes.
And what was the impact on you from that point? You were charged with a criminal offence. It was initially a sole occasion of bodily harm, but then I think it was dropped down to a lesser form of assault, and then you were put on trial, weren't you? And how did you come? How did you come to me? What brought you to me?
As soon as I found out that I was under investigation, my first thoughts were to contact my union because, I was informed that being ex-army, I'd never been in the union, never had any contact with the union in my adult life. So I contacted my union and informed them that I'm under investigation by the police and that I need the legal support that I'm entitled to. I was told then that I was not entitled to any legal defence or funding, which was, it struck me as strange because I was told that, if you are a member of the union, you will be supported and get legal financial assistance. So when I was told that I couldn't get any legal assistance, I was lucky enough to find you. It was there, and it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. Truly.
Appreciate that. And I think we struck that problem with the prosecution not giving us everything, and the corrections. We knew corrections had things. So you were placed in a position where a lot of people are, unfortunately, where the defence lawyers have to go and do a lot of the investigative work for them because the system's not acting the way it should do in terms of being fair and transparent. So we subpoenaed all that stuff from your file, and that's how we found out that they in fact had all this other footage, but they'd only taken that very little bit of footage of the actual incident. So that, as you said, during the trial, I made a big deal out of that, didn't I? The fact that they had taken an hour and a half or something like that of the hallway, but chose only to keep this narrow little bit of the actual incident inside the room, which was just beggars belief, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yeah, and I'm sure that was done to make it look worse than it was.
Well, I mean,
to take away the justifications for the actions.
It certainly did, didn't it? And the police justify this on the basis that they've taken the bit that's relevant, and it's not their job to work out what's relevant, and they've got to operate with an open, objective mind to the possibility that you're not guilty of the offence, and they've got to act fairly. And it certainly would have felt to you that they weren't being fair, that the system was working against you, I imagine.
I think they had to work that way because they were trying to appease corrections. You know, they'd done their investigation. They knew they didn't have enough evidence, so the evidence they had to make it look as bad as they could, I suppose. You know, that, and whether that was the police, but I'm probably more than confident it was more corrections.
Yeah.
Because they had mud on their face. You know, I was 4.5 months out of the job on paid leave, and the police informed corrections that they didn't have the evidence to charge me 2 weeks after I was marched out.
You know, we went to trial. It was a longer trial, and you would have sat at the bar table with me, and I imagine it was a very stressful and uncomfortable situation. But just tell our clients what it felt like for you to be in your own trial, watching that unfold. Did you feel like you were supported? Did you feel it was fair? Did you have that?
Yeah. Look, I've had active service. I've been in a war zone. You know, I know what stressful environments are like. That was one of the most stressful experiences that I've ever had in my life.
Yes.
You know, I've been a law-abiding citizen my entire life. I've been a person of service my entire life. First service to my country and then service to my community.
Yes.
And that was the way that I was treated by the legal system. The only good thing that happened there was the fact that I had you sitting next to me and supporting me the whole way through. And at the end of the trial, when I was found guilty, and I was so frustrated, I had tears rolling down my face. When the judge was given all of the documentation about how I was an RSM in the Army, how you know, I'd done service, exemplary service throughout my career. I had, you know, references from colonels who were the the defence attaché to France, and all of this sort of stuff. So it wasn't like low-level people. These were high-level people giving me, you know, recommendations and so forth about my character, sense of duty and so forth. And for her to sit there and then look at me after saying, I know how badly you treat prisoners. I know prison isn't a dangerous place for you, you know. The things that she said, she was testifying against me and belittling me, and she doesn't know me. You know, for her to say those things and then turn around and thank me for my service, it took all of my self-restraint not to jump the counter. I was very angry and I had tears coming down my face, and she made the statement that everybody throughout the trial told the truth, with the exception of me, that my testimony was self-serving and untrue. So she called me a liar when I wasn't lying. Everybody throughout the trial said the same thing as me.
That's right.
And with the exception of the prisoner. And yet I told incorrect information and my information was self-serving and untrue. These were the reasons why I was so angry.
You're right. Like sometimes it's difficult, and you know we had to press on, didn't we? We had to continue forcing the right questions to be asked, and ensuring that the cross-examination was done properly, even if there was opposition to it, because ultimately what we did have to do was appeal that outcome, and we needed the transcript. And almost immediately the decision was overturned, wasn't it, on appeal? And you were acquitted of the charge.
6.5 days on trial to be found guilty by that judge.
The magistrate,
Yeah, the magistrate, sorry. And then 17 minutes we were in the appeal. And even then the police prosecutor, who was represented at that time, stated again, for the record, that they never had the evidence to charge me in the first place, and that
You shouldn't have been charged.
I shouldn't have been charged, and that, you know, I shouldn't have gone to the court in the first place.
That's right.
And you know, but you know, that said, before we did the appeal, I was spent. I was emotionally done. And I don't know if you recall, but you said we need to appeal this. I want you to appeal this. And I said, look, I'm done. I can't do it mentally, financially, etc., etc. And that's when you turned around and said to me, no, what I'd seen in that courtroom was not your profession, was not the legal system, was not correct, true. Yeah. And that you needed to show me that the actual justice system does work. And, you know, so I went forward and went with you that day, and I'm so glad that I did, because it gave me some sense of peace in that I wasn't a criminal, that the things that were said to me weren't true, that, you know, and it was brought out that they didn't have the evidence to charge me in the first place.
You were vindicated.
You had the great name for that personal touch and that dog fight that you need to have as a defence attorney to, you know, provide what innocent people require, you know, when they go to court.
So you felt that we never gave up and kept pushing?
Never did. And you know, you were positive throughout the whole trial. When I sat in there and watched the judge deny you this and deny you that, and no, you can't say this, and just sit down, you're not allowed to do that. When in actual fact, it was your job and your right to do what she was saying you can't do, because heaven forbid you provide actual evidence to say that I'm actually innocent and not what she had in her mindset that I was.
Did you feel that the prosecution of you was fair, or do you think did you feel that they were out to get you no matter what?
Definitely out to get me, I believe, which I found funny, because, you know, when they call you and say we don't have the evidence to charge you, and they're so dogged in their attacks on me, and you know, making statements up that were untrue. You know, like just they look at a piece of footage and they say this is exactly what happened, and he did this and he did that, and then called supposed expert witnesses to come in and you know, say I didn't do the right thing here, and I didn't do the right thing there, and I spoke about the clavicle notch thing and everything else. And for them to go down that way and to paint me that way, it was so bad.
Yeah.
And you know, throughout the trial, I ended up having a mental breakdown. You know.
I'm sorry, I wasn't aware of that at the time.
Yeah, that's right. It happened towards the after the final decision. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So between the final decision and then the actual what's it called, the appeal. Yeah.
And this you've told me about that since then, but you know, it's just highlights how stressful these things are, particularly when you're in the position where you feel that the system should be fair and open, but it seems that it's working against you. It must have felt very stressful.
With the exception of my family and you, I was alone. I was alone in this, and I felt that that I had nobody. That everybody else was against me, and you know, there was. It was very hard, you know, and then to be treated the way that I was, you know, when you do that and then you contemplate suicide and everything else as a result of what they did, you know, you think about now, and the things you think about was, you know, the trial would have been a lot worse if I didn't have you in my corner to do the appeal and to fight the way that you did throughout the trial. To me, that was worth all the money in the world, but not that money matters. Yeah, and to hear that you actually started up representing correctional officers and, of course, obviously police officers was fantastic because, you know, I know that it's very similar to whatever their union fees are. Is the same that you pay to have you at on call for any situation. And I can tell you 100%, in corrections, you're just a number. And they will throw you under the bus whenever it suits them. And if you don't have somebody to have your back, you are just kidding yourself in that job. They are merciless in the way that they treat staff. They use you, and then they abuse you and throw you out. And, you know, I was so disappointed with corrections as a whole. I had to go up in front of ethical standards, and the way that they treated me during that, it wasn't like, we're questioning you in regards to this incident. You did this, yeah, blah, blah, blah. Why? Why did you do that? Why did you do this? And, you know, when you actually justify your answers, and they used to say, they had a saying, and it's the Woodford way. You know, this Woodford's way of dealing with this. Woodford is the biggest prison in southeast Queensland. Yeah. It has, you know, some of the most dangerous prisoners in Queensland. They tell you, you know, as required, always use force if needed, as a last resort, obviously, but don't be afraid to use force because you'll be supported when you do. You know, in this case, they chose not to. So
yeah, they didn't support you.
They didn't support me. And since then, there has been so many of my former colleagues that have been marched out for absolute bullshit reasons that needed legal support, and I'm glad that you know, quite a few of them have come to you to get that and have the successful results that they have. And you know, because without having you in my corner, I would never have got through this, and perhaps I probably wouldn't be here today.
And one of the things I guess that I pride myself on knowing about is use of force, because I had to use it. I've never been in situations like you have, but certainly I understand use of force. I've been at the coalface myself in the police, and I think it's a thing that unless you've been there and understood why and how you need to use force, it's easy to sit back as a passive observer and judge that use of force without understanding the atmospherics and the things that are being presented to you to decide whether or not you need to apply force or not. And that I think gives us the edge in terms of dismantling a lot of those so-called experts about, well, if you're sitting at the academy and someone's sitting on the chair in front of you, which they never are, right? It's an operational environment. The use of force in the pretty manual never survives the first second of an engagement. That's I think something that gives us the ability to unpack those things and explain it to courts. Yeah.
Look, and I want to add that without your support, I probably might not have been here, and that I would highly recommend the Essential Services Retainer. I highly recommend that every correctional staff member has or joins that, because the support you gave me was absolutely fantastic, and it was personal, and I felt like you were doing it because it was personal to you as well. And that's what you want, thank you very much, mate. I really appreciate everything that you did for me.
Thanks for it.